Welcome to our channel. Today, we pause to remember a life that touched hearts and left a lasting impact. We'll explore their journey, the challenges they faced, and the moments that made them unforgettable. Join us as we honor their story, celebrate their legacy, and reflect on the memories that will continue to inspire and live on in the hearts of those who knew them. The news was confirmed quietly, early in the day. Ralph Towner, a composer who spent his life listening more than speaking, passed away on January 18, 2026. He was 85 years old. The world did not lose a loud voice, but it lost one that understood silence. Ralph Towner was born on March 1, 1940, in the United States. Music entered his life early, not as performance, but as structure. He studied classical composition and piano, learning discipline before freedom. Those early years shaped how he would later approach sound, not as decoration, but as design. While many musicians chose a single path, Towner moved between many. He mastered the 12-string guitar, classical guitar, piano, and a wide range of instruments that included synthesizer, trumpet, and French horn. Each instrument became part of the same language. He did not use them to show range, but to find balance. In the early 1970s, Towner co-founded the group Organ. The band would become one of the most influential acoustic ensembles of its time. Their music blended jazz, classical traditions, and global influences without forcing them together. Space mattered as much as sound. Organ did not rush. Their performances felt patient, almost meditative. Instead of loud solos, they used texture and timing. A pause could speak as clearly as a note. For many listeners, this approach felt new, even radical. A longtime collaborator once said, Ralph believed every note had a responsibility. If it didn't belong, it didn't stay. That belief shaped both his writing and his presence on stage. Nothing was accidental. Towner's compositions often felt architectural. Themes were built slowly, with careful attention to form. He treated music like a physical space, something a listener could walk through. There was always a sense of direction, even when the path felt open. Beyond Organ, Towner released many solo and collaborative albums. His work with ECM Records became especially notable. The recordings were clean, intimate, and honest. They invited listeners into close contact with the music. Critics often struggled to label him. Jazz, classical, folk, and world music were all present, but none fully contained him. Towner seemed uninterested in categories. What mattered was whether the music felt true. Younger guitarists frequently spoke about his influence. Many said his playing taught them restraint. One wrote online, Ralph Towner showed me that speed wasn't depth. Listening was. His impact was quiet, but widespread. Despite his accomplishments, Towner remained reserved. He avoided celebrity and rarely explained his work in grand terms. He believed music should speak for itself. That humility became part of his legacy. In later years, he continued composing and performing, though at a slower pace. Age did not dull his curiosity. If anything, his music became more spacious. Notes lingered longer. Silence grew more meaningful. When news of his passing spread, reactions were gentle and reflective. Fellow musicians shared memories instead of headlines. One composer wrote, Ralph didn't chase attention. He earned respect, one piece at a time. There was no dramatic final performance, no sudden ending. His death felt like the natural close of a long sentence, carefully written. It was not silence, but resolution. Listeners returned to his recordings in the days that followed. Old albums felt newly alive. The music had not aged. It waited, just as it always had. Ralph Towner taught audiences how to slow down. He showed that listening is an act of care. In a world that often rushes forward, his work asked people to pause and notice what was already there. His legacy does not live in charts or trends. It lives in the hands of musicians who choose space over noise, and in listeners who find meaning between the notes. Ralph Towner is gone, but the conversation he began with sound continues, quietly, patiently, and without end. The news arrived softly, confirmed in the early hours of January 17, 2026. Roger Allers had passed away, leaving behind stories that had shaped childhoods, guided families, and quietly taught millions how to look inward. Roger Allers was drawn to storytelling from an early age. Art was not just a skill for him, but a way to understand people and purpose. He studied illustration and film, learning how images could carry emotion without words. That foundation would later define the way he approached animation, not as spectacle, but as meaning. His career led him to Disney Animation during a time of renewal and ambition. It was a period when animated films were beginning to take themselves seriously again, both artistically and emotionally. Allers stood out for his interest in myth and structure, believing that the oldest stories still mattered most. That belief reached its fullest expression with The Lion King. As co-director, Allers helped shape a film that felt simple on the surface, yet deeply layered beneath. Drawing from classic myth, Shakespearean themes, and universal ideas of loss and responsibility, the story spoke to audiences of every age. It was not just a box office success. It became a shared cultural memory. Many who worked with him described his calm presence. One former Disney colleague recalled, "Roger always asked what the story was trying to teach, not what it was trying to sell." That question guided every creative choice. The film's emotional weight came from restraint, not excess. The Lion King taught viewers about identity, duty, and the idea that life moves in cycles. These were themes Allers returned to often. He believed stories should help people understand their place in the world, especially during moments of change. That philosophy remained central long after his time at Disney. In later years, Allers continued exploring meaning through animation. Projects like Open Season showed a lighter side, while The Prophet, based on the work of Khalil Gibran, reflected his lifelong interest in spiritual and philosophical ideas. These works may not have matched the reach of his earlier success, but they carried the same quiet intention. Allers never chased attention. He preferred the work to speak for itself. Friends noted that he measured success not by awards, but by whether a story stayed with someone after the screen went dark. A fan wrote online after his passing, "His films didn't just entertain us. They helped raise us." As news of his death spread, tributes came from across the animation world. Many spoke of his generosity as a mentor and his respect for younger artists. One animator shared, "Roger believed animation could guide people, not just amuse them." He never forgot that responsibility. Roger Allers' passing marked the end of a remarkable creative life, but not the end of his influence. His films continue to be revisited by new generations, each finding their own meaning within them. Children discover the stories for the first time, while adults return to them with deeper understanding. His legacy lives in moments of recognition, when a viewer sees themselves reflected in a character's journey. It lives in the idea that stories can help people remember who they are, even when they feel lost. Roger Allers leaves behind more than films. He leaves behind guidance, offered quietly through animation, still unfolding with every retelling. The news was confirmed quietly, shared first among those who knew his work best. On January 12, 2026, John Forté passed away, marking the loss of a creative force whose influence was often heard before it was seen. John Forté moved through hip-hop with a different kind of presence. He was not always in the spotlight, but his ideas shaped the sound of a defining era. As a member of the refugee camp All-Stars, he worked closely with Wyclef Jean and the Fugees at a time when hip-hop was expanding its voice and reach. His strength was vision, knowing how pieces fit together before others could hear it. His most lasting contributions were felt through the score, an album that helped reshape American music in the mid-1990s. Forté's role was creative and structural, helping guide tone, rhythm, and emotional balance. Those who worked with him often described him as a connector, someone who understood how stories, beats, and voices could move as one. A longtime collaborator once said, "John heard the song behind the song." It was a simple phrase, but it captured his gift. He listened deeply and worked patiently, shaping music from the inside out. His influence extended beyond one group, touching artists like A Tribe Called Quest and others who valued thought over flash. His life also included hardship, addressed with honesty rather than drama. Forté faced incarceration, a period that removed him from the world he helped build. He accepted responsibility for his actions and later spoke about that time as one of reflection and learning. It did not define his talent, but it reshaped his understanding of purpose. When he returned to music, it was not framed as a comeback, but a continuation. Forté approached his work with greater clarity and restraint. He focused on growth, collaboration, and giving voice to experience. A fan wrote after his passing, his music felt wiser because he lived it. In later years, he remained respected as both an artist and a mentor. Younger musicians sought his insight, not just for technique, but for perspective. He reminded others that creativity and accountability could exist together, and that redemption was possible through honest work. News of his death brought a wave of quiet tributes. Artists and listeners shared memories of songs that carried his influence, even when his name was not always known. One message read, "John Forté helped build the sound we grew up with. We just didn't always see him doing it." John Forté's passing is felt not in headlines, but in echoes. His fingerprints remain on music that still plays, still moves, still speaks. He leaves behind a legacy of depth, resilience, and unseen craftsmanship. His story stands as proof that impact does not always demand attention. Sometimes, it lives in the structure beneath the surface, steady and enduring. And in that foundation, John Forté is remembered. The news moved quietly through the jazz community on January 7, 2026. Rebecca Kilgore had passed away, leaving behind a voice that never chased attention, yet stayed with listeners long after the final note faded. Rebecca Kilgore's love for jazz began early in Portland, Oregon. She was drawn to the music's honesty and structure, to the way stories lived inside melody and rhythm. From the beginning, she approached singing with care, learning the roots before shaping her own sound. Jazz, for her, was not a trend, but a language to be protected. She became deeply connected to the Great American Songbook. These songs were not treated as museum pieces, but as living stories. Kilgore studied phrasing, timing, and emotion with patience. She believed every lyric deserved clarity, and every note deserved purpose. Her voice was known for precision and emotional balance. She never pushed a song beyond what it needed. Instead, she trusted simplicity. Audiences often described her performances as calm and intimate, even in larger rooms. There was a sense that she was singing to the song itself, not over it. Throughout her career, Kilgore worked closely with respected jazz musicians who shared her values. Collaboration mattered more than recognition. On stage, she listened carefully, responding to each instrument with ease and respect. This created performances that felt like conversations rather than showcases. One longtime collaborator once said, "Rebecca knew when to step forward and when to step back. That's real musicianship." That understanding made her presence special. She brought steadiness to every setting, whether recording in a studio or performing live. Kilgore never sought celebrity status. Her reputation grew through consistency, humility, and professionalism. She arrived prepared, respected her fellow musicians, and honored the audience. Younger singers often looked to her as a quiet example of how to build a meaningful career without losing integrity. Her recordings reflected the same thoughtful approach. Each album felt intentional, shaped by careful song choices and honest delivery. She allowed space in her music, giving listeners time to feel rather than react. A fan shared online, "She made you slow down." Her voice felt like a pause in the day. When news of her passing spread, tributes came softly but sincerely. Jazz clubs, musicians, and listeners shared memories of evenings filled with warmth and attention. One message read, "Rebecca didn't just sing jazz. She kept its heart steady." Her death was felt deeply, though quietly. There were no loud headlines, only reflection. Those who understood her work recognized what had been lost, and what remained. Her influence continued through students, recordings, and the values she lived by. Rebecca Kilgore's legacy is one of continuity. She showed that tradition survives through care, discipline, and love. In a changing world, she offered steadiness and respect for the past. Her voice still lives in the music she left behind, gentle and clear. And in every careful phrase sung by those she inspired, Rebecca Kilgore is remembered, carrying jazz forward with grace.